The Dark Below and House of Wolves DLCs gave us all hope for the future of Destiny. From the moment players knew about them, speculation about what these DLCs would include would run wild amongst the Destiny player base, but not all was hopeful. Others who were very unimpressed with the launch of the game would be more than skeptical of the DLCs. Players would find outside of the map glitches also to access areas that would be exclusive to the Dark Below and House of Wolves, furthering the idea that the Dark Below and House of Wolves content were cut from the original game and sold separately as DLCs. But before we talk about the first DLC, The Dark Below, we need to briefly discuss the game during the 3-month gap between Vanilla's launch and The Dark Below. The state of the game in Vanilla was rough to say the least. The grind was definitely real. Getting above the XP level cap of 20 would require gear with the light level attribute, and the maximum light level gear would grant you level 30, but this could only be acquired through the raid, Iron Banner, or an exotic piece of armor. Vendor gear or gear earned anywhere else in the system would cap you at level 28, so doing this endgame PvE and PvP content was the only real way to reach maximum level. This would spawn the Forever 29 meme that so many players were victim to if you couldn't just get one more piece of armor that would bump you up to level 30. There's kind of a similar struggle now with the Pinnacle grind in Destiny 2, but again, this gear had to be obtained in endgame content only, and being level 29 was a much larger problem for you to compete than it is in Destiny 2 with the Pinnacle grind. At a level 29, you did 50% less damage and took 50% more damage just by being one level under 30. The increase to survivability and damage output by being a level 30 was so high that the stuck at 29 problem was a much bigger one than we face today with the Pinnacle grind. On top of this grind, weapons and armor both needed to be leveled up by simply gaining XP with them while equipped, and required so many materials to upgrade. Weapon parts, armor materials, planetary materials, ascendant shards. The grind was too much. Now, would the Dark Below address any of these quality of life issues? No, and I don't think many people expected it to. Being only 3 months after launch, the dev team likely didn't have time or a solution to solve these problems that players had with the game before the Dark Below would launch. But a solution would still come a little bit later in the House of Wolves. The only change for now that would alleviate some of the grind was the ability to buy planetary materials from a vendor in the tower rather than having to run material farms on the planets, which was, of course, a much welcome addition. In the meantime though, Dark Below content and gear would be bumped up to the new light level of 32, and in so doing would sunset all of the hard-earned and grinded gear from Vanilla. All of your Vault of Glass gear, sunset. All of your old legendary weapons, capped at 300 damage. And exotics required an upgrade from Xur, which would reset its stats, requiring players to restart their grind on those weapons or armor pieces. So pretty much the same vanilla grind continued into the Dark Below. Now, as for the content in the Dark Below, we received a short 5-mission campaign focused on the moon, a few post-campaign questlines centered around the Knights of Crota and helping the new vendor, Eris Morn, stave off the Hive from the solar system. We got 2 new strikes, the Will of Crota and the Undying Mind, 4 new exotic weapons, 9 new exotic armor pieces, 3 new PvP maps, a vendor refresh, and a new 6-player raid, Crota's End. Now, Dark Below gets a lot of flack for being one of the worst DLCs in Destiny history, and there's a lot of reasons why, but looking back at the amount of content we received is actually not that bad. Lots of new exotics, plenty of new PvP maps, 2 of the best strikes in the game, and the raid. Love it or hate it, Dark Below brought a decent amount of new things to do, especially when it came to the core activities. The Crota's End raid launched on the same day as the expansion, so many players were eager to get in there after their great experience with the Vault of Glass. And Crota's End wasn't always easy. In fact, Crota's End kicked all of our asses early on. Just the intro to the raid with the lamp encounter was enough to prevent many of us from continuing on. Survivability was probably the toughest part of Crota's End. Things like the ogres on totems would prove to be majorly difficult. The Death Singer was unbelievably tough due to the health of the knights that would surround her, and Crota was a real bitch to get done, especially thanks to his many glitches. Despite the raid not aging well as time went on, and this next point not aging well either, initial impressions were that Crota's End was harder than Vault of Glass. But of course, the level grind and the chance at new loot was too strong to stay away. And it wasn't long before many different cheeses were found in pretty much every single encounter. Lamps could be cheesed by being launched ahead, totems could be cheesed by despawning ads by getting out of the map, and Crota would go through many different cheese methods, most notably the Ethernet cable glitch which caused him to stay kneeled down indefinitely. Only a couple of these cheeses were actually patched, while the bridge encounter stayed the same. Crota's End became one of the easiest raids once we learned there wasn't a whole lot of depth to the mechanics and you could just take a lot of shortcuts. The Dark Below was essentially just an addition of content to the foundation of the vanilla Destiny game, and while the content did quench our thirst for a little while, it was clear that the game would need a bit more of a shake-up to the quality of life and core systems. Thankfully, the House of Wolves would do just that. Prior to the House of Wolves launch, news would come that it would not include a raid, and instead would receive a 3-man endgame piece of content. This was a major disappointment to fans who had expected nothing less than a raid based on previous leaks, and worried that the endgame would be shallow during the House of Wolves. But thankfully, the House of Wolves did just enough things right that it would be received much more positively than the Dark Below. The marketing campaign was turned up a notch for House of Wolves between some great trailers, and some reveal streams showing off things like the Prison of Elders and the Trials of Osiris, and a week before House of Wolves launched, Bungie brought a new public event to the game known to us as the Wolves Are Prowling event. This would basically just be massive waves of Fallen on different planets that, when cleared, would provide a hidden chest in the area that contained a new consumable, a treasure key. Treasure keys would be used later in the DLC to open chests after the end of a Prison of Elders completion, so during this pre-launch week, everyone, and I mean everyone, was farming treasure keys. Also, there was a cheese for that. Hopping on your Sparrow and going out of the area and coming back, opening the chest once again was a way to endlessly farm until the time ran out. And this week pre-launch of House of Wolves was a glorious time. When House of Wolves did finally launch in May of 2015, we were greeted with some welcome quality of life changes, most notably Etheric Light. Etheric Light allowed us to infuse all of our previous gear from Vanilla and Dark Below to the current maximum light of level 34. This was obviously great as all our previously earned gear was relevant again, and of course new endgame gear would drop at the same level. The only problem with this was making the new gear a little bit obsolete, as our previous gear was just a lot better than the House of Wolves gear for the most part. I mean, why would you take a 6 Dreg Pride when you could just use a Fatebringer? But again, on the flip side, all of the content was relevant in the game. Vault of Glass, Crota's End, and of course the new House of Wolves content could all be farmed. Speaking of which, what did House of Wolves bring to the table content-wise? Well, it brought another relatively short campaign with much better writing than Vanilla or Dark Below, featuring great characters like Petravenge and Varix, 2 favorite characters who continue to be favorites in the game today. It brought only one new strike, the Shadow Thief featuring Taniks, and this was his first introduction before he was reused 4 times after this. It brought a new social space, the Reef, 3 new exotic weapons, 9 new exotic armor pieces, 4 PvP maps, a vendor refresh, a much lessened grind for weapons and armor pieces, Trials of Osiris, and the Prison of Elders endgame activity that featured 6 unique bosses with mechanics. Most notably and importantly though, Skolas, who was essentially the 3-man raid boss of the DLC. House of Wolves definitely was not light on the content, and I think more than made up for not including a raid. Now, if House of Wolves did ship with a raid, I think we'd be talking S-tier expansion. Better than some fall expansions. But even without the raid, House of Wolves added plenty to keep us busy, and made just enough changes to quality of life, even if they were temporary, that it kept us all pretty happy. Now, Prison of Elders was great, in my opinion at least, but did start to get a little bit boring as the weeks went by. The only real reason to keep playing was for a chance at one of the 3 new exotics, all of which have become fan favorites, I might add. Shortly after launch, Skolas would receive a nerf to his health pool, which was a more than welcome change because initially that fight was damn near impossible to do. But one of the biggest and probably most important additions during the House of Wolves was the Trials of Osiris. Trials of Osiris was the competitive mode the game was missing for so long. 3v3, 1 life, deathmatch. Some argue that Trials was a bad thing from the start and was not needed, but I'd say that even with the flaws it brought to the game, I think it skyrocketed Destiny's popularity in many ways. It was not only addicting and fun for most players to try out, but viewership on Twitch related to Trials was huge and growing quickly. The loot related to Trials of Osiris was also top tier. The weapons were great, the armor was by far the best looking armor in the game at the time, emblems, shaders, a trip to the coveted lighthouse, all of it was desirable. Now, like I said, there were some drawbacks to Trials being added. What used to be a much more casual experience, PvP began to be a lot more sweaty in general thanks to Trials and the focus on the meta. Last Word, Thorn, Firebolt Grenades, Fellwinter's Lie, Final Round Sniper, all these things became the norm, and in some ways the enjoyment of PvP suffered. Despite minor grievances though, House of Wolves is what I consider to be one of the best times in Destiny's history. All of the content in the game was relevant thanks to Etheric Light, PvP was at its peak interest amongst everybody, Prison of Elders was mostly a success, and the core activity content was plentiful. House of Wolves was by far the best content we had to date. Well, until this came along.